Thank you. Good evening. If an actress started on stage at the age of 2, was a star of vaudeville, Broadway, movies, and television, had her character represented and maybe misrepresented in a Broadway musical, was cited, Gypsy was the one, was cited in the Guinness Book of World Records, and now owned her own rustic little town, you would think she would have quite a story to tell. And if that actress were June Havoc, of whom all those things are, in fact, true, then she would be able to tell her story very well indeed, since Miss Havoc has shown herself to be a crackling good writer of books and plays. And her latest book is called More Havoc, which shows how well she talks about herself and her life in print. Happily, she is my guest tonight, and otherwise this introduction would be pointless, wouldn't it? And also tomorrow night. So we're going to be treated to a demonstration of how well she talks about herself in person as well as in print. So if you'll welcome, please, the remarkable June Havoc. How do you do? Say, we've got him in the palm of our hand. Oh, I'm sorry, the lady hasn't sat yet.
I'm used to that.
There you are.
After all, freedom and all that sort of thing. You can sit in my lap if you want to. It's perfectly all right.
Later.
All right.
Is it bothering you that I'm wearing brown shoes with dark pants? Whenever anyone criticizes that, I point out that Fred Astaire does it, and that's all you need to say about it, I would think.
If you were wearing no shoes, it really wouldn't matter.
No, you've seen everything,
No,
you?
it isn't that. It's that I just believe in live and let live. That's all.
Okay. Is it possible for a human being to dance before it can walk? Is that
yes, oh goodness,
actually,
yes.
Physiologically?
Dance before it talks. It. We're saying it, isn't that?
It, yeah. As if it were an object.
Yes, well, in a way. Anyway, it is quite possible, as a matter of fact, because the impulse to do, well, the first thing that we are encouraged by when we have a baby is that the baby throws something. Doesn't grab something, but throws something out of the high chair or what. That's a great step forward.
But to maybe in other societies it's not, but to actually dance before you walk seems to me like somebody got something reversed.
I'm sorry to hear you say that, Dick. It speaks poorly of your character and background. But
well, they've been criticized before. I'm used to it, I think.
No, my impulse, apparently, although I don't quite remember the first time I got up on my toes, but my first impulse was the sugar bowl, I'm told. It was up there, center stage on the table.
Oh, I thought that was the name of a dance. You mean
no,
the real,
not
yeah.
it was the bowl of sugar.
Yeah.
And apparently I couldn't reach it, and so I got up on my toes. Now, some people's toes are not equipped for this kind of work, sugar bowl work.
No.
And they do not oblige, but my toes were made for it. They're all the same across, well, yes, but you can see they're all the same sort of size there. They come out like this, which means that if you bend them over, they give you good support.
Yeah.
So I got up on my toes, reached the sugar bowl. That was just an inkling. But then when I stayed up on my toes, Mother, who said, aha, here is a passport to freedom. Somebody's going to want to buy that. That's commercial.
She really had her eye out commercially right from the very beginning. Then,
well, it wasn't just Mother. It was all the women in that family. They were a very special breed. There were 8 of them. There was Dottie, great-grandmother, big lady, grandmother, my mother, Rose, her 2 sisters, Mina and Belle. And then Mother had 2 daughters. Everybody had daughters. People were unheard of having sons. It just was not done. And
it's a good thing you weren't Chinese.
They wouldn't have liked that.
No.
Well, we weren't, so isn't that lucky?
Yeah, it is more profitable to raise geese than girls, is the old Chinese saying.
Oh, I've never heard that. I'm not sure I approve of that. Anyway,
sorry about that.
We had girls, and they had girls, and they didn't particularly care about the state of marriage.
Yes, you point out that they married frequently and as if it were something you could enter into quite easily and perhaps might cure all your problems.
Yes, but it didn't.
No.
And men were like tissues, they were disposable. And it never seemed to solve a problem, but it always looked as though maybe it would. But it never did, Dick, you see. So they went on in this great disappointment, one after the other. And then when I grew up and became 12 and realized that vaudeville, which had been my childhood, my life, my everything, was gone, I too decided that marriage was the passport to freedom. So I took out a contract on a little boy in the act, and contrary to the myth, it is not the little boy my sister loved. As a matter of fact, my sister hated the little boys in the act. She would never even talk to them.
So that aspect of Gypsy is...
Oh, it's ridiculous, yes.
Silly.
But there are many aspects to the play that, which is a fable. It's billed as a fable, and they're commercialized.
Sure.
The commercialized facts. And some of the real facts, I think, oh, we're dealing with people with so much talent. Jerry Robbins and... You know, these people have so much talent, and I just wish they could have stretched it one more inch further and done something with the truth, which is totally fascinating.
It's often the last thing considered, isn't it?
I'm afraid so.
A lot of people could say easily about you knowing just that fact that you grew up in vaudeville. What a poor little pitiful thing to have happen to you. I mean, poor child, have that happen. No lawn, no dog, no...
Dog? Oh, many dogs. Every
well, I mean by
dog.
that, no dog on the lawn. You didn't have a house...
No lawn.
No, right.
Yes,
No.
yes. Well, I had something, I think, that fed me and still feeds me so much more, Dick. I had the audience. I had something that I think any child in the world could envy.
You haven't grown blasé to that.
Oh, how could you? This was a rare, perfect world.
Yeah.
I was fortunate. Unlike the fable, once again, there was no amateur contest. It's, you know, the poor people who have to play that play and who believe that that probably is so. Well, maybe it serves a purpose, but I've been a professional since I was 2 years old, which means that I've been out center stage on some of the best boards there are. There were people like Jack Benny, Willie Weston McGinty, Bert Wheeler, and I was on those same boards, and I headlined, and I earned $1,500 a week. In those days, at the age of 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11. There were 5 gorgeous years playing those theaters, those big, wonderful theaters with no amplification. It tickles me.
That always irritates you, does it, when you go to Broadway and hear what sounds like a record being played on the...
And people doing their acts these days to playbacks?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yes. Well, anyway, get back that. So, consequently, where was I during all that time? I may not have gone to school. I may not have ever seen the interior of an HOME until I was an adult. But I had the acts on the bill. I had the stage hands who taught me not to chew gum. Ladies don't chew gum. Spit that out. I had the acts on the bill were like, well, there was Godiva and her seals. Oh, Dick, it was a beautiful act. She got in the tank with all these seals, and she did that act, and she looked like a mermaid. And then down in the grotto below, under the stage where they kept the seals, I came upon her once. I must have been maybe 7 years old. And do you know what she was doing? She had a baby seal in her arms, in a blanket, a baby blanket. It had just been born. And she was humming to the baby seal, and I got to hold that baby seal. Well, that's a great, wonderful present.
But what did she do in the tank with them? Was this an act for the whole family? Or?
Oh, well, look, vaudeville had to be an act for the whole family.
Yeah.
Vaudeville. Now, here's another misrepresentation of vaudeville. You do not swing a baton in vaudeville, and you do not do things that you can do in high school or school in vaudeville. Mm-hmm. The boards were very demanding, Dick. You had to really deliver in order to justify being on the boards. Godiva's act. She would dive, she wore great long hair and a long, pure silk black suit up to here and down around her feet, so that when she was in the tank with the seals, her hair was flying. And they did a thing called, and her voice would come out and say, "And now, ladies and gentlemen, the Maiden's Prayer." It was wonderful. And she'd hold the seal by the tail and go around in a circle with him. And then they'd all stop, and the seal would hold his flippers up like this, and she'd hold her hands up like that. And that was the Maiden's Prayer. was beautiful.
No one found that nauseating?
Family entertainment. Everybody loved O'Dive. There were big signs backstage
Yes.
on the whole circuit. And here's a misconception, too. These big signs read, do not use the word damn, hell, do not mention the deity, hip-length silk stockings at all times, keep your act clean but loud. Those were the rules.
Where was this?
Vaudeville.
Oh, you mean everybody in general?
Yes, all of vaudeville. That was a very classy sort of family entertainment, and the families were very demanding.
Miss Havoc, shall I call you June?
Please do.
Can you confirm or deny a rumor that I've tried to run down for years with someone who in your position?
Which is?
My
all right.
hometown was in Lincoln, Nebraska. And
Yes.
every time I've mentioned that to a vaudevillian, they have groaned. And one of them, I once asked one why, and they said there was a sign backstage, I think at the Orpheum in Omaha, and it said, if you think you're funny, play Lincoln. Is this
Isn't that
possible?
funny? I've played Lincoln all my life, off and on.
And you managed to get a laugh?
That was some disgruntled clown, obviously,
Probably.
who didn't make it in
Who had
Lincoln.
just toured the other way and bombed in Lincoln.
Of course, it was sour grapes, I'm afraid. Don't pay any attention to that.
Okay.
Omaha's a
That-
wonderful place. Do you know that Megan Terry has her Magic Theater out there? Omaha is still a theater town? Mm-hmm. Well, you should be
It
proud.
gave us Henry Fonda?
Yes.
Others of his kind?
Yay, Omaha.
Well, I would love to hear you talk about your mother, although Lord knows by this time you must have exorcised just about all the feelings you have in print, but television reaches so many more people. What word would you use to describe her now? Is neurotic too mild?
Oh, you mean if I were using today's vocabulary?
Yeah.
Well, let's get back to the myth, Dick. The myth has Mother as a big, loud, garish, bizarre calliope. Now, if you see something like that coming at you, you duck.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that true? Mother wasn't like that. Mother was little, violet-eyed, curly-haired. She never wore lipstick or makeup or high heels or silk stockings in her life. Very simple little, almost corny clothes.
Mm-hmm.
And she was lethal.
Yes, you never knew when the axe was going to fall, did you?
Right, and that's what makes people lethal. Now, Mother was innocent. There wasn't anything vicious about Mother. It's just that she was, in those days we were ignorant of analysis and problems and people who needed help. Today we would recognize this. Mother always felt that if she wanted something and it happened to be yours, that didn't matter, she took it. Mother did what she wanted to do. She had a pipeline to God and didn't think that there was any threat from that direction.
Yeah.
And so it was a peculiar sort of a innocent murderess. You know, a whole different kind of killer.
Mm-hmm.
And you had to understand that. I understood it. And in More Havoc, I keep going back to my sister and to my mother,
Yes.
because I too am of the breed. And although I hope I have overcome or passed some of the danger marks, because I must have, or I wouldn't be such a happy freak. There'd be something wrong. But gee whiz, where's some wood to knock on?
That may not be it, by the way. So don't
It
count
looks
on
very
that.
phony, but I'm very, oh. But
the
what
best
I'm
we can do.
saying is that in spite of everything, I think if you live, I believe that if you live and you see enough bad examples, that you're going to learn from that.
Sure.
And I feel that I was kind of lucky in as much as I saw an awful lot of bad examples. And consequently, I thought, well, gee, that doesn't work, does it? That doesn't pay off. And where I want to go, and what I wish with all my heart to be, and have since I was 5, when I played in the bill with the star from the legitimate theater who was taking a flyer in vaudeville. They used to do that, you know?
Flyer?
Yeah, they took a flyer in vaudeville.
Yeah.
Well, she sounded different from the rest of us, and she smelled so good. And she was, oh, there was something about her, and that was a world that I hadn't been introduced to yet. So I hung around her, and when I got to know that she came from what was called the legitimate theater, I set my 5-year-old mind going toward that direction. And the fact that I did get there speaks for the fact that it doesn't matter about your environment. If you're going to do it, you're going to do it.
Well, when did you realize that your mother was not like everyone else's? I mean, are there early memories that a psychiatrist would begin with?
Yes, I think so. Quite a few. In fact, they're endless. They go on and on. But Mother was incapable of understanding, for instance, which comes out rather funny if you use it that way, that when you took something, you should pay for it. Mm-hmm. Mother, at one time, I remember later, said, "Oh, isn't it wonderful? Do you know that so-and-so has charge accounts? You know what that means, don't you? That means she never has to pay a bill." She believed that.
She thought that was literally true.
Well, she thought that if you handled it right, the only crime was getting caught. Mm-hmm. Do not get caught with your sleeves. I was great at it. I used to fill my sleeves at the 10-cent stores. I was very quick. I was an expert. And around 6 years old, I suddenly said, what am I doing with my sleeves full of stolen stuff? And I don't even want the stuff. But the game was such fun.
Is that why you're wearing short sleeves now, to inhibit this talent?
I've reformed. I had reformed long ago. Yeah. Then the business of cheating at hotel bills, going out the back way in the middle of the night. I found suddenly that grabbing my dog and my stuff and sliding down there, it wasn't, I didn't like it. Yeah. I didn't want to live that way. I wanted to go out the lobby, and I do.
Well, when you...
Honest, I do, Dick.
Almost always, man. But in those very earliest days, well, were you embarrassed? It's hard to tell an incident in the book, how you felt about the incident with, was it Pavlova?
Pavlova.
Pavlova,
you mean
of course.
when
accent the second syllable.
Well, I'm not correcting you. I don't even know, for Pete's sake.
You were, I don't know, 4 or 5 then,
with
or
Pavlova.
less?
No,
yeah.
I was 2.
Well, I remembered it as 2, but I was afraid to say that.
Well, it was the very beginning. Pavlova was doing one of her farewell tours, and she came to Seattle, where I happened to be at the time. And Mother, I was booked. I was the child protege, you know, of Seattle. Oh, they were so proud that this little thing could stand up on its toes in a tutu. So I was rushed to the theater where and there were other people doing, concert people and what have you. And I was under her tutu, apparently, because I looked up and all I saw were ruffles. I didn't see a face or anything, but I heard a voice. Whether it was she who spoke or someone who spoke for her, I do not know. But Mother's voice said, "Can you tell me, madam, my little girl, my baby, walks on her toes like this, and I call out, ring step, and she turns, and I call out, such a step, and she does that. Is it possible that she is a born ballerina?" There was only a second's pause, and this voice said, "At 2, get her off her toes. Her feet will be deformed the rest of her life. No, too early to tell. You will ruin her, and do not have a chance. Wait until she's old enough and has some bones." And then there was a silence. The tutu moved away. Mother went right around the corner, bought me 10 more pair of toe shoes, and I worked from then on. So the advice didn't work.
And is anything about you deformed or ruined by that at all?
Well, I don't like to admit it, but actually the feet were the first things to go. But it could have been the dance marathons. It could have been all the other things.
Yes.
You know.
And your mother said that woman, I hardly understood a word she said.
Yes. Oh, that accent, Mother said. I couldn't understand a word, that foreigner. Mother used to call the acts on the bill who did tumbling Arabs.
Whether they were or not.
Oh, yes. Everybody was an Arab. Mm-hmm. We'd go into a restaurant with everybody on the bill, and Mother would always be in the forefront. And she'd take one look at the restaurant, and she'd say, if she didn't like it, she'd say, "Ah, Greeks," and they'd leave. Mother was...
That covered any restaurant that was
anything she didn't
to.
like, because she didn't know Greeks. She didn't know Arabs. She didn't know those people, and therefore they were all a threat.
Well, did you ever dare criticize her? Did you ever...
At what point?
Stand up at that early age and say...
Yes, I did.
Yeah.
I was very unpopular. Yeah. I used to say, no, I don't like that. I won't do that. And it didn't do any good. It didn't matter. There was no saying anything like that to Mother. She was a very singularly straight-minded person. One thought and went for that thought. And you either went along or you just dropped off, you know, and went your way, which I eventually did.
What have you decided she was compensating for in her daughters? if
I don't
anything
feel
in particular?
I don't feel that's necessary. I think
not
there we
that.
go again, doing that again. I think she was what she was, and she was a product of her breed. And my sister and I used to constantly say when we became adults, and we were together finally at last,
Yeah.
Gypsy and I'd say, "Ah, do you know what you just said? Ooh, don't do that. We'll be like them if we don't look out." Because we didn't want to be like them.
Be like them, meaning what?
All the other women
Oh, I see.
in the breed who had had all of the disappointments, the constant failures. One died a drug addict. Another died of alcoholism. They were unhappy people. Mother died alone and most painfully and horribly. It's a gothic horror. And I managed to write that in More Havoc. That was hard to write. But I think if you're going, I believe in the truth. I believe the truth. I like the truth.
Can you possibly tell that unforgettable deathbed scene?
I had trouble enough writing that scene. I don't think I could tell it. And that's why my publishers at Harper & Row, I've got a brilliant editor, and I'm very lucky. And that scene troubled us terribly. It was too strong for a lot of places in the book, and it was in the book in the beginning. And one night I went to bed knowing that he was not happy with that scene being in there. I woke up in the morning and I said, yes, it is 1954 when Mother died at 56. So the book ends at 1946. What I did was put a prologue and an epilogue onto the book, and it works that way, Dick.
Yeah.
It fits.
It's astonishing. It would be wonderful in a movie with the right actors, well, of course, with the right actresses playing it.
Well, I think there's so much untold about us. You know, all my adult life, I have been a victim of what I call preconceived-itis. People think they know all about my sister Gypsy, my mother Rose, me. They don't know anything about us because all we've done is be commercialized. All we've done is be fableized. The truth has never been told. My sister was terrified of the truth, and she thought it was much safer. She felt that the audience could only accept a very funny, ha-ha, glossy, make 'em laugh constantly version of what we were and what we are. Consequently, that's what she did, and she did it magnificently. No one did it better. But Gypsy's whole endings were such conclusive proof to me that that does not work. And the fact that I'm the only survivor, here I am, everyone is gone. I feel more than ever aware that pretending to be something you aren't isn't going to work in the long run, and oh, I would love to think I'm in for a long run.
Well, let's hope so. You talk about her as someone who came to dislike the, whatever you would call it, the persona
image
that she invented for herself, I guess. And yet there she was stuck in it, like the mime who can't get the comic mask off.
Yes, exactly true. Exactly true, and I run into so many people who really love that image so much, and who say, oh, she was so funny and laughing, and it was very painful for her, really, because Gypsy always felt that what she had created was a step toward what she really was going to have, which was a more legitimate position in the world. It never materialized, because if she didn't take off the gloves and make a little semi-sly joke, the people didn't want that. Everything had to be based on the character that she had so perfectly built. And she could not break away from it. In another way, Marilyn Monroe died of the same sad heartache.
Yeah, I would never think of her and Gypsy Rose Lee in the same
Oh, you must.
breath, but I see what you mean, I guess.
You must, yes, because Gypsy, while Gypsy's was more intellectual and it was still comic, and Marilyn's was sex symbol. And although Marilyn finally went and learned and was a brilliant actress before she died, really brilliant, but wasn't permitted to ever be taken seriously. And the last cry was, please listen to me. And no one did.
You knew her where? At the Actors Studio?
Maryland?
Was that where you
I
met?
knew her at Fox, at 20th Century Fox.
Uh-huh.
And then I knew her, yes, at the Actors Studio. Oh, yes. I knew her from the 50s on. And it's a very strange parallel, because, and they're not the only ones. There was the Jean Harlow image.
Yeah.
You know, the unhappy ending to an image that the public believes is the end-all of glamour and wonder, and how wonderful, and how I envy that, and how I'd love to have that.
I should have her problems.
I should have her problems, but her problems created acids that these late studies show us, Dick, eat you from within. And they can. They can make you die from within outward. And at 56, my sister died.
Yeah.
My mother was 56 also.
Both of cancer.
Yes. But a complicated cancer, not just cancer. First, it was other things. Gypsy had an ulcer inside an ulcer. A form of colitis that was, it's painful. But
I can imagine that it's too hard for you to tell that deathbed scene. There's just one aspect of it, though. We only have a minute left, in which, in a sense, your mother delivered a curse on your sister more, really, than on you.
Well, Mother's concept of fame and the world of glory was taking a ride in a paddy wagon with the sirens all screaming because Gypsy was arrested for indecent exposure, and Mother thought that was stardom. That was it, the top. That was as far as you could get for great. And so I was not spectacular. I have never been spectacular. Mine has been a very quiet little member of a very quiet little groupie. You know, the legitimate theater isn't noisy. And so I didn't figure it. I didn't rate a curse. So Mother turned to the member of the family who did rate it, my sister, and they were always closer anyway, and said, I will, you know, she said, you're always going to know I'm there, and don't forget it. And when I asked my sister, why only you? Why not me? My sister said, well, you didn't rate it. You just weren't spectacular. How many rides in the paddy wagon did you give her?
Yeah.
So...
Gee, what a complicated psyche was involved there.
Yes, I say it was a complicated thing, and not to be so condemned as pitied, because it can't happen now if we're aware.
Yeah. June, I will see you in the same place tomorrow night. We'll continue.
I look forward to it.
Great. June Havoc. See you tomorrow night.
Funding for
Good evening. Thank you. That fine actress, colorful lady, gifted writer, June Havoc, has a book of memoirs out now called More Havoc. And if you watched my show with her last night, you know that that's what it made us want. More Havoc, and that's exactly what we're going to get tonight. She is back for a second show, and a few years back, Dorothy Parker, no less, called Miss Havoc's first book a genuine and remarkable slice of Americana, and I think that's what Miss Havoc is, too. In the most complimentary possible way, I mean that. If you'll welcome again, please, June Havoc.
Thank you. Thank you, Dick.
Yeah.
You know, with Dorothy Parker saying that about Early Havoc, which was my first book, Early Havoc is in every Americana collection in the world. I'm very proud of that.
Because you used that word about it?
No, it's a sort of a reference book on that time of our country, and hardly anyone apparently had documented it. I used it not as background, but as foreground in that book.
Yes, and you've had a lot of praise as a writer. I know Charlotte Curtis in the Times said you told your success is better than anyone has, or as well as anyone ever has, or something like that.
Better,
Where's
Dick.
Better. Was it better?
Yes.
Oh,
Better, she said. I was out of my mind. Then, of course, my publishers were so enormously impressed, because that's a very important lady and not easy to please, apparently.
So you did...
Double.
You did all right.
Oh, I was very thrilled. Yeah. I'm drunk.
You
all.
I'm glad you added that.
Yes, I had to.
For our older viewers. The dance marathons.
Oh, yes.
That's something that I can never quite get my mind around or believe that they actually took place the way we've seen them both in your play.
Well, they weren't
play.
outlawed until 1947.
They were
Dick.
outlawed for...
State by state,
yeah.
county by county, eventually outlawed, because early on, when they first began, which is before I was ever in them, and they weren't very perfected, by the time I was in them in the mid-30s, they had become much more, you know, they were really into it. But early on, people would dance for $1,000, and then if they fell down and were disqualified from the show, they'd put them to sleep, and sometimes they slept right on into eternity and out. So they had to stop doing that because it was very bad for business.
Do you have any idea how many fatalities there were from dance
There were 3 or
marathons?
4 early on. And so they learned how to do this without killing everybody who was in the contests. By the time I got there, the rules and regulations were very, very much in effect. You danced for 45 minutes. You had 2 minutes to get to the rest quarters. The bell rang.
Yeah.
Then you had 11 minutes off your feet. Straight up like this, preferably. Then the siren rang, and it was a siren because after about 500 hours you never heard the bell, so it had to be a siren. And so then you sort of were thrown to your feet and pushed toward the dance floor, and you got out there for another 45 minutes. That was 24 hours a day.
Oh.
In the beginning. That was about maybe 1,000 hours.
1,000 hours?
Yes, and if you could sing or dance a little bit, people threw money to you. And at first I was too proud to pick it up, but you know, you get desperate when you're hungry enough. And you got 12 meals every 24 hours for staying on your feet.
Yeah.
They brought in a great big board and put it on a couple of sawhorses and brought in this big army grub. And you had to keep moving your feet while you ate. But you know, I was so hungry when I first entered my first dance marathon that I figured that that was a very good deal. And as I think now, if you're hungry enough, it's still a good deal.
It comes to something like 1,400 meals or something like that. So someone figured it. But see, 4 days and nights is about 100 hours. And so
the one
so you can see that 1,000 is quite a lot.
Yes,
How many
is.
days is it?
Well, I don't remember exactly. I always had to chart it. But the one that I won, finally, the 7th one, in More Havoc, I talk about, I used to go back to the marathon when I got good and hungry after standing in chorus lines, and I was never chosen. Nobody ever couldn't get a job. So I'd go back to the dance marathon. And the 7th one, I looked around and I realized how punchy people were getting, and I said, geez, you've got to get out of this and get... So I quit, and I said, I better win one. So I'll have more than, what, $5 to get back to New York with. And I danced for 3,600 hours. And I was in the Guinness Book of Records for a while over that one. That's about 4.5 months.
You danced for 4.5 months?
Oh, yes. Well, that was par for the course. And you realize, please, that a city like Chicago, New York, any big city, used to have as many as 10 dance marathons running simultaneously, Dick, during the Depression. It was the entertainment. People would come with picnic baskets and blankets and stay for hours and scream for you to keep on your feet. Don't fall down. And I came to the conclusion that what they were doing, because we were in such a mess in this country, they were screaming really for their own survival. You represented
Keep
them.
on your feet symbolically.
Don't fall down, yes. Don't give up. Don't quit. And of course, the country didn't quit, did it, Dick? Look at us. We came up out of that morass, and I hope we don't ever sink into it again.
If only never to have to go through dance marathons.
Well, we can't. At least they've been outlawed. God knows what they'll invent for this one.
Maybe you ought to start thinking fast.
Yes.
It's hard to believe that you and your sister, who became Gypsy Rose Lee, were never really rivals.
Well, there was nothing in common to
for your
rival
mother's
at.
affection, if there was any. You have to admit there.
Mother's affection.
Did she have such a thing as affection for you, or what would you call it?
In her way.
In a way.
Which was not what people, but then we're not. Mother wasn't the girl next door. I'm not the girl next door, and certainly my breed of family are far from any door. But Mother had passion, enormous passion. And Mother loved Gypsy because Gypsy was beautiful. And was always, Gypsy won a baby beauty contest. Did you know that? Yes, when she was an infant.
Baby Gypsy. In fact, I think I've seen a picture of her.
Yes, there she was on that rug, first prize.
Yeah.
And then, of course, when I started to dance and started to act, and I was in the movies the first time when I was 3, Mother took me to Hollywood and stood me in a line with 500 other kids, and she has pinched my cheeks so I'd look pinky and pretty. And the director came down the aisle, and he looked at all the kids, and he poked everybody, and finally he looked at me, and he said, let's see. And he put his cap over my curls, and he said, yeah, she'll do. We want a beaten, hungry, starved little waif for this part. That's the one. Well, Mother was furious, but we got the job. I was in the movie. Mary Astor played my mother, and we went on from there. And then I was in the vaudeville. I was with the Duffy Players at the age of 4, which was a very respectable stock company in San Francisco. And then in vaudeville. And then after the act got established and set, contrary to the myth, then we sent for my sister.
Yeah.
And Mother tried to work her into the act. But Gypsy didn't sing. She never sang or danced or acted, and didn't want to. I used to come off the stage, after dancing. And she used to say, I can't understand. That's very vulgar. Why does anybody ever want to work themselves to that degree? She meant it.
She did. So the idea of you two singing and dancing as little tykes together was invented?
Oh, yes, invented once again, an invention. Yeah. We never appeared on the same stage together, ever, in our lives.
Even later, even at a benefit or anything
like that? Never. We had a very separate identity. I was way over there, rather quiet. In fact, so quiet that many people hardly knew I was there. But I was very happy where I was. I loved that part of my world.
You were made to feel that she was the beautiful child.
Well, she was. Dick, she was breathtakingly beautiful as always.
Well, you're no dog yourself.
Oh, you're very kind. I'm sure you just... there's no check involved with this, giving you money or anything.
Was she vain about those so supposedly superior looks?
I don't think she knew how beautiful she was. She was, yes, she didn't want to age. That was kind of sad. She didn't want to age. And it's, in so many poetic ways, in a lyrical, poetic way, a Gypsy Rose Lee or a Marilyn Monroe or a Lillian Russell, I guess, should never grow old. And of course, she didn't. But she didn't like the beginnings of it at all, where I kind of love this aging business. I'm enjoying every minute of it.
But she panicked at the first wrinkle?
Yes. Yes. And there's so much, there's so much to aging if you've run the show in a way that you're proud of, and you get what makes you happy inside, and you're kind of proud of what you have. Then aging becomes a very natural sort of follow-up to what you did and what you had and what you were. Then now you're this, and then you can look forward to being that. And I hope that I keep my marbles, because I love everything and I don't want to miss a minute of it.
You could lose a marble or two and still have a nice time.
You think so? Sometimes it might even be better.
They never tell you how many marbles make a complete set, do they?
Wonderful, Dick.
She and your mother only communicated through attorneys for a long time,
yes.
I guess.
The myth again. They didn't. They parted because Mother became a terrible threat to my sister. Mother's concept of justice. She wanted to be there in the light, always, with Gypsy. And when Gypsy's light transcended the rides in the paddy wagons, and Gypsy went on to writing and being funny, she used Mother a great deal as her funny character. And the Mother resented being a funny character terribly. And one of the things that stuck in Mother's craw was being a funny character. And so I remember she wrote something, we never saw it because it probably was so terrible, but she wrote something and sent it off to a newspaper which was current then, called the Journal American. And it said, there's more where this came from. Just make a deal, and I'll sell you this. And it was apparently scurrilous things about Gypsy that was so bad that they couldn't print it, and they were sort of a sheet that might have, but they didn't. And they sent it to my sister instead, and we were living together at the time. And Gypsy said, wow, you should read this. No, on second thought, you shouldn't. I don't want anybody to read it, and she burned it. And she hadn't seen Mother for years, except through an attorney.
What What attitude toward men did your mother give you?
Well, Mother didn't believe in men. In any sense of the word, men were not even useful toward the end. They were obstacles because they expected to be looked at and probably cared for, and Mother didn't have any pleasure in caring for them. And if you had money, a lot of something to give, that was different. Then you could be tolerated. But you were kind of weighed, you know, for your value. But if you didn't have lots to give, you were not even to be looked at. And the one thing in More Havoc that I tell about Mother's interest in Walter, you know, the boy that she befriended because he was very good at forging checks. And therefore, he was valuable. And
Not everyone who can do that.
no, and he apparently was good because he took Mother, everybody, we were filled with presents and flowers and things that he had purchased for us. And then the police came. And that was a rough moment. Apprehension had arrived. And so Mother stalled the police and said, please, can you wait? It's like my own son. I just, you know, wait. So the men said, of course. And they waited outside. Mother went into Walter and said, Walter, what did you do wrong? And he said, well, I don't know. She said, you've got to know. That's the whole point. I have to know what you did that was wrong because, you see, Mother had planned to do this. But she never found out what he did wrong. And so Walter gummed up the whole thing, and so she had to let the police come in and take Walter away. And it was very bad because Walter had failed her.
And she gave up her plans to be the world's second best.
That's
forger,
right. Mother did forge many a birth certificate, but that was different.
Well, your own child came, well, would you tell about that? It involves a taxi, at least one.
Oh, that's kind of my belief in the world, I guess. When I was staggering out into the night when I knew I was going to have the baby, and with my little suitcase, the doctor said, get to the hospital. And the pains were coming rather consistently, and he told me that I would have them, and they knocked me right off my feet. They were so bad. And I got in one taxi cab, and I got one of them, and wow, I fell down the bottom, and I said, hurry, please, get me to the hospital. I'm having a baby. And he said, oh, not in my taxi, you ain't out. So he got me out of the taxi. And he said, I don't want no mess in the middle of my night. He said, I got trouble enough as it is. So I was out in the middle of the night and saying to myself, darn him, that's a rotten thing. The lamppost and I had the next pain.
Darn him is what you were saying?
I said, damn him.
I was going to say.
So the lamppost and I had the next pain, and I began to walk because I thought I've got to get to the hospital. And the taxi overtook me, and I said, and I got in, and I'm trying to hide the pains now for fear of being thrown out again. And suddenly I realized that this driver was going through lights and was just honking his horn and just going like mad for that. And he got there and he threw open the door and he picked me up and he carried me up all those stairs. And halfway up I said, I'm too fat. I wait. He said, fat nothing. You're just pleasingly pregnant. He said, I've done this 6 times for my wife and I'm looking forward to the 7th. So I kind of felt that that's a balance. And that's how the world is. You know, there's one...
Found that for every louse, there's a good person?
Yes, or maybe 2, or maybe more. But I think we're better than we are bad. I do.
Yeah. You never had to get out of that first cab, you know. I mean, you could have just said, you're going to have a bigger mess than the one you're thinking of if you don't take me to the
I didn't know that. You know, at that age, what do you know?
Oh, that's true.
I didn't know such things.
She was 9 at the time.
Well, I didn't know that.
We don't want to tell the whole book.
No, not the whole book.
That isn't true, of course. It's interesting how you got your first big break, and it was really overnight success, wasn't it? In one sense, you'd had plenty of experience, but
it was the overnight success I'd worked all my life since I was 2.
Success.
Yes, to get
so
Pal Joey, you mean?
Yeah.
Yes.
And it always seems like then that the person came out of nowhere.
Isn't it true?
Instead of
yes.
spent a lifetime trying to get...
But then, you see, it's like the public today. All the people who think they know you, and unless they see you doing a commercial every day, or they actually see you, they think you're either dead, or over there, or who cares. They don't forget you. That's what's so strange, because I pick up the phone now. Even now, I pick up the phone, and I try to place a call, and an operator will say, hey, wait, oh, gee, I know that voice. Now, you know, that's beautiful. That's what you live for.
But it wears
Cal
off
Joey-
for some people.
I don't know what's
They don't get the fun
happened.
out of it anymore, they say. Or
Oh.
applause doesn't mean anything anymore. You
Who
read.
says that?
Well, in myths of showbiz, maybe myths in the untrue sense, but
Well, maybe for some people.
the actor who says, I envy you, you're young and you still enjoy it, but I'm stuck with it.
Oh, wow. I can't fancy that.
Yeah.
You know where I live now, where I am
Well,
now.
I don't know whether to believe it or not. I know so few people who own a town that...
It isn't a town, it's a village.
Yeah.
But it's a little funny village, and people will come, after I've done this show, people will come, and they come from all over, and they come to the village, and they come to see me many times.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, it's just like when I was a little tiny kid. There's the audience again. I'm so glad to see them.
There don't have to be boards under your feet to be an
No,
audience?
it's kind of the new boards under
Yeah.
the feet. It's a little place where I can share the one. Can I show you a picture of
Yes,
part of it?
I've been meaning to ask about those, but then
Well, you know, who
maybe they
can
were
come-
left over from an old show or something.
Well, Cannon Crossing is a tiny little at least 200 years old now. It may be more, but that's part of Cannon Crossing. There were 8 farm buildings.
Would you explain where it's called Cannon Crossing?
Well, there was a family at one point of its history whose name was Cannon, and there's a cannon out on Route 7. You know, that the family put out there
I don't know
100 or
whether-
some odd years ago.
Whether they're named after it or vice versa.
And then the whole little town was called Cannondale, and that's the railroad station. This is the railroad station. It's a Victorian station called Cannondale.
Well, you sort of discovered this, didn't you, as
Oh, yes.
as a town for sale or
Yes.
something? I didn't know there was such a
Well,
thing.
I used to go over and have my peanut butter sandwich along the river here because it's so beautiful with great ancient trees, and oh golly, it's beautiful, Dick. And then one day, about 3 years ago, somebody said, the whole village is for sale. Well, I hawked everything I owned and I bought it. And
Really hawked everything?
Yes, I had auctions. I don't have a fur. I don't have a decent painting or a piece of silver or a diamond left. And you know what? I look around and I don't miss them because I have Cannon Crossing, which is the end of the world. Wonderful. This is, well, you can see, this is where this is the other side of the railroad tracks, which is Cannon Crossing, which is on that. We're now looking the opposite side of the depot. The railroad came through in 1840. And the depot is just a beautiful hysterical building, hysterically gorgeous building.
Those are old gas pumps.
Yes, and they say, oh dear, they say 23 cents a gallon. Isn't that scary? Well, that's what they say.
Fiction.
Well, old. This is my latest love. There was the schoolhouse, 1872, that when Cannon Crossing became a place, it looked like it was going to be a town. And so they built a little schoolhouse. And it was up on Route 7. Now, Route 7, as anybody knows, is the wildest trafficked place. There are 8 million cars. They have to enlarge it. It's so wild. When this picture was taken, there are 2 goats standing on a dirt road, which was Route 7. This is the little schoolhouse that I have moved onto Cannon Crossing just lately. Isn't that an enchanting thing? The goats, of course, have gone, but the schoolhouse is there. Now, in
Did you say goats or ghosts?
Goats.
Oh, goats.
There were goats on the dirt road. That was Route 7.
I thought 2 ghosts were standing on the road.
Not yet
Wondered how
then,
they-
now. But the traffic, I read, in going back to find out the history of a place, the traffic on Route 7 at the time was considered very bad. And it says in a scrawly handwriting in the legends, it says, we have to do something about the schoolhouse. The traffic is getting dangerous. There are 10 carriages a day that pass there. And then in 1925, it said, something has to be done about the schoolhouse because there are terrible traffic problems. There are 20 cars a day go by there.
You're surely not old enough to remember when people were saying the human body will not survive speeds as high as 35 miles an hour.
I thought I was old enough to remember everything, but I've forgotten that one.
I've heard that they used to say that about,
Really?
yes, when the automobile came in. They said the human body cannot travel at that speed. It's been scientifically proved.
They should see the men going up to the moon.
Yeah.
Yes, golly. But Cannon Crossing has, now we're opening on July 4th, Dick. We're opening the Schoolhouse Cafe and Riverside Gardens. Isn't that to die? It's a restaurant.
Another opening?
Another opening, another night, and it's going to be so beautiful because there's the Norwalk River, and here are these great groves of gorgeous ancient trees. And it's a real, honest-to-Pete, restored
Do it.
schoolhouse.
Do an outdoor production of our town or something.
You could there so easily.
Yeah.
But there are antique shops, and there's a weaver and a potter, and there's a tinsmith,
So it's a
And a
step into the
quilter.
time machine, if you want
right
to go.
back to when things were much more tranquil. Friends of mine come out now, actor friends, show people friends, who are pretty frenzied, you know, they come out and they say, oh, boy, something just went snap in the back of my neck and I don't have to worry anymore. It has a sense of tranquility that is just unbelievable. So I'm happy with that.
I'd think you would be.
I love it.
Can I ask you about an anecdote? I know you think it doesn't tell well, but it's from your book, and it has to do with, it involves Chinese dragons on the carpet and...
oh, my golly. I wonder if I could tell it. I'll try.
Okay.
And sometimes, you know, you write something and then you look at it and you think, gee, I'll never be able to tell it. But when I was really hungry, before and during the dance marathons, one of the trips was an agent who grabbed me by the hand because I was standing out in his hallway doing, I think, a hungry cat for the bunch of kid actors too. And he said, you come with me and tell this to the guy I'm going to introduce you to. And he took me up to Fifth Avenue, up an elevator, a beautiful old building, thrust me inside. The Japanese servant came to the door, and it was all tapestries, oriental urns and carpets and dragons, and it looked like a classy, high-class Chinese restaurant, to me, of course, because that's my idea of class. And it was a 10-room, 12-room, 16-room apartment, probably. And I was to meet the great man. Now, when I was a little teeny kid, you said I could say this word sometimes.
I don't know which one I...
Well, the one I said...
We went over a list of your obscenities backstage.
Yes, you could say that word. Well, I'm going to try, because this story's no good without it. There was a... Whenever you had to try something new, and you had to go out and face your audience, and you were terrified and nervous about it, you had to work up confidence enough to do it justice. And so an old character actor told me once, he said, now you get the wings are right here. He said, the audience is right there. And he said, you mutter this to yourself. And you say to yourself, to the audience, you lucky sons of bitches, you're going to get to see me, and then get out there fast while it's still working.
While you're convinced yourself.
While you're convinced that the audience is going to get lucky to see you. Believe it or give up. So I said, oh boy, and I looked around at all the dragons and the urns and the carpets and everything, and I thought, I'll try it. And I got close to a portiere and I said to myself, you lucky, and I got no further than that, and the voice said the rest of it for me. And the curtain parted, and there was a little old man in a shawl and carpet slippers. And I said, gee, you know that? He said, no. And he said, of course I know. Come on in here. And I went in, and he had cocoa, and he had pastries. Boy, I was hungry. And he gave me a few, and I gulped down a hot chocolate. And then he said, give me your shoes. And I said, well, he said, give me your shoes. So he took my shoes, and he said, give me that newspaper over there. So I gave him the newspaper, and he folded it just so, and then he took out the newspaper that I had put in the soles of my shoes, and he said, you did it all wrong. He said, it doesn't last that way. I'll show you how to make it last. And he put them in, and by golly, he was right. They were almost as good as soles. And then he said, you're vaudeville, aren't you? And I'd been told not to admit it because it was a bad mark on you. And he said, listen, don't tell them. They're snobs. Never tell them you're vaudeville. He says, they don't recognize you for what you're really worth, but he said, I do. And while he was talking, he fell asleep. And I didn't know what to do. I sat there for a while thinking I ought to, and then I finished the cocoa and the rest of the pastries and knocked off everything that was there. And I said to myself, gee, I ought to leave a note, because he obviously meant well, whoever he was, and he was kind and old and sweet. So I took a piece of paper from his desk, and I wrote, thank you for the food and the nice time. And up in the corner of it, his name, it said George M. Cohan. Wow. And it was George M. Cohan. And I got that little tiny brief glimpse of what that man really was. And a lot of people never really knew him that way, Dick.
I guess not. Was he well past it then? Was there any...
yes, I think that was it.
Yeah. What is the trick to folding newspaper in your shoes?
Well, you have to be very careful. And you can't let the ridges go under. They have to go up. I'll show you when we get through with this show. Then you'll never have to worry.
I think everyone in show business ought to know how to make and a few people out of it also. Well, obviously the dance marathons and your strange mother and all the various things that have happened to you in your life have given you some survival instinct and capacity to enjoy life that's just wonderful.
I'm just a happy freak, that's all.
Yes. Well, keep it up.
Thank you, Dick.
June Havoc, it's been a pleasure having you here this
I've
evening.
enjoyed it.
Yeah. See you next time. Good night.